This episode is proudly supported by Pepe Sayer Australian Cultured Butter, batch churned from single origin cream.
Like any good product, you have to start off with an amazing cream. Like for us, it's the raw material that matters. So where we get our cream from matters a lot. So we can't just buy your average supermarket grade cream. So you need real cream. You need basically the stuff they skim off the top of milk at a farm. And to get that product, we have to go to the farmers direct. So for us, we have to source our cream very carefully. We travel a lot to different farms to make sure that the cream we're getting is the real deal from different areas of Australia.
For more information, go to pepesayer.com.au.
It really, a lot of it is to do with boundaries as well, and just making sure that also at the end of the day we remember that we're not saving people's lives, we're literally serving people food and drink and giving them a good time. And I think sometimes that perspective of, you know, not putting too much stress and pressure on everyone can help a lot as well.
Mental health in hospitality is a topic we're always thinking about on this podcast. It just seems there are so many pressures on people working in the industry, and sometimes people don't know where to turn for support, or even that it's okay to need support. Our guest today is Tobie-Anna Durk. Tobie is in the UK. She is an Aussie though. She's the founder of Kelly's Cause, which is a UK-based charity which is on a mission to create a mentally healthy hospitality industry for all. A friend of the podcast, Sebastian Pasinetti, is an ambassador for Kelly's Cause in Australia. It's super exciting to have that international connection. But Tobie-Anna, welcome to Dirty Linen.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, lovely to talk to you. Tell us about Kelly's Cause, how it started and the sad reason behind it.
Yeah, so I started Kelly's Cause about 3.5 years ago now, in honour of my very dear friend and fellow chef Kelly. So I moved to London from Australia in 2016, I think it was. Is that right? That's 7 years ago, right? And went to cooking school here and became a chef. And at cooking school, I met Kelly. We became really good friends. Both went off to work in different restaurants across London. And then she very sadly took her own life when she was just 23. So I always say it wasn't just working in hospitality. She did have her struggles with mental health. We shouldn't use the word struggles when we talk about mental health, actually, but her experiences of poor mental health before going into the hospitality industry. But it was the kind of conditions that she faced working in the industry, the long hours, the stressful situations. She was working in places where she wasn't very well respected and was treated quite poorly. And all of those things kind of culminated in, her suicide in 2018, so just over 5 years ago now. And obviously after that, after kind of getting over the initial shock and being completely distraught about it, I realised that Kelly wasn't the only one in her situation, and that there were plenty of other people in hospitality, both front and back of house, who were experiencing really poor mental health because of the conditions that they were facing. And I really just wanted to do something positive in her legacy. I didn't want it to always be remembered about how she died. I wanted there to be something positive, and just to make the kind of change that we so badly need in this industry that still, 5 years later, we've got somewhere, but it's a slow process.
What kinds of things does Kelly's Cause do?
So we provide mental health first aid training. That's our kind of main aim. So basically, I wanted to find something that was very practical and action focused. I just feel like there's a lot of initiatives around raising awareness, and raising awareness is great, but what we need is action. I feel like the time for awareness has come and gone. It's time for action. So I wanted to find something that was very action focused and practical, because I think people who work in hospitality respond to that really well. We're people who are on our feet all day, we're interacting with people, we're doing things constantly. So I found mental health first aid to be the best thing to kind of fit in with that and be something that people could come along to either a half-day course or a 2-day course, and take away practical skills that they could actually use to look after themselves and others and to quite literally save people's lives. And now over the last 3.5 years, we've kind of progressed to also offering other mental health services. Like we work a lot with businesses in hospitality to help them create a mental health policy and strategy. We help put out wellbeing surveys where we get kind of like real feedback from teams about how they feel things are going. We've also big on creating a sense of community. So we run quite a few different events and really want that kind of sense of bringing people together in hospitality.
Wow, there's so much to it, Tobie-Anna. I mean, congratulations on your work and for creating something so positive out of something so devastating. With this, you know, the very first things that you might learn as part of mental health first aid, what are some of the real basics?
I guess the first most important thing for everyone to understand is that we all have mental health. So mental health is something that every single person has. It's something that in the past we kind of thought of in the negative. So when people speak about mental health, they think that means someone experiencing a mental health crisis or poor mental health or a mental health illness. But mental health is something that every single person on this planet has. It can be either positive or negative, good or bad, healthy or unhealthy at any kind of given point. But the distinction between mental health and then mental ill health, whereas mental ill health is not something everybody is going to experience. It's just something that, you know, quite a large percentage of people are going to experience, but not every single person. So that distinction between mental health and mental ill health, and the fact that mental health is something every single person has, and that also any single person can experience mental health issues as well. You know, mental health issues really don't discriminate. It can happen to absolutely anybody.
Yeah, that's really interesting and very inclusive. And I suppose, you know, when you think about a spectrum, everybody's on it at some point, aren't they?
Yeah, exactly. So that's literally one thing that we learn in mental health first aid is the mental health continuum, which shows us how our mental health can kind of change over time and how we all exist on this, as you say, spectrum, where some people will have, you know, really good, healthy mental health majority of the time. Other people will sit somewhere in the middle where they may have good mental health sometimes and poor mental health other times. And then other people will sit at the other end where they experience quite serious mental health issues or poor mental health for long periods of time.
Yeah, when I think about being trained in first aid, I think about one being able to help people, but also being able to recognise issues that I might have myself. Is that something that you find with this sort of training? Is it sometimes just as important for people to be able to recognise their own needs or put a name to their own experiences?
100%. I actually cannot tell you how many times over the last 3.5 years of delivering mental health first aid, I've had people come to me after or message or email me after and say, I've reached out to get help for myself. I'm seeking therapy because I know that my mental health is something I need to support, or, you know, I've started meditating every day, or I've started doing this, or I've had this difficult conversation with this person, or I've set this boundary. So I would say that probably the thing people take away the most actually is something that they can do to support themselves and look after their own mental health. And yeah, there's definitely a big emphasis on self-care and looking after yourself and recognizing how challenging looking after others can be as well. So there is a big element of that is definitely people looking kind of internally as well.
You know, one thing that you make me think, as you say that, is, you know, I think because there are staffing crises in hospitality all around the world, that a lot of people are promoted into leadership positions at a pretty young age and often without a lot of experience. Do you think that that's something that can, I guess, intensify or exacerbate, you know, mental ill health?
Absolutely. And it can intensify or exacerbate the mental ill health for that person and also for the team working underneath them or working with them, because it is something that happens everywhere. And actually it's been so interesting speaking to lots of people in hospitality in Australia recently with us launching Kelly's Cause in Australia, that the issues are truly universal. Like, I'll speak with people and we'll just be like, yes, this is exactly the same thing that happens here. Or like, I've got some friends who work in hospitality in the US, Canada, same thing. It's all like, it's very, very universal. And yeah, absolutely. We see people being promoted. I mean, I was promoted to being a head chef after working as a chef for like 2 years and having absolutely no management training or experience. And just because you're good at cooking doesn't mean that you're good at managing people. And it is, as you say, it's the staffing issues that means that we kind of over promote people or promote people way too quickly without giving them the support, which is really hard for them as well, because you're then trying to prove that you can do a job that you haven't been equipped with the skills to do. And then some of those things kind of trickle down to the team that you are managing as well.
I mean, what kinds of things might you notice in yourself that it could be a signal that you're not coping with things?
Oh, so many different things. I think we talk in mental health first aid about your stress signature, which is like the thing that shows in how you think, feel, behave when you're stressed and overwhelmed, or in the context of mental health first aid, when your stress container is full and overflowing. And I think one that we see a lot in hospitality, and especially amongst chefs, I'm just talking this from my personal experience, that we kind of think as chefs as being quite angry or short-tempered. And I would say that's not the case. It's just that most chefs' stress container is massively overflowing. So that can be one thing, being a bit shouty or aggressive or, a little bit short-tempered. And in no way am I excusing any kind of abusive behavior or anything, because that is 100% not okay. But we can also understand that sometimes the positions and situations we put people in can exacerbate those things. And then for other people, it can just be completely throwing themselves into work. We all have seen that working in hospitality, the person who's the first in, the last to leave, never wants to leave when you stay for a few drinks after work, really trying to prove themselves, whether that's because there's something going on in their personal life that trying to, run away from or not address or whatever it might be. It can kind of be anything kind of on the spectrum where, you go kind of one way or the other, or just any change in someone's kind of personality, really.
I mean, it can be so hard to address the conditions that you're working in, or, the mood in a workplace. What kinds of strategies are there for starting to unpick some of these, I guess to slowly empty out the stress container?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes, and I'll be honest, especially after doing this for nearly 4 years and thinking about mental health in hospitality and trying to, convince businesses that investing in their staff's mental health and wellbeing is a great thing for them to do, both because it's the right thing to do and also from a business perspective, that it's a very tough uphill battle. I'm not going to be honest. I'm not going to lie. Sometimes it really does feel like pushing a massive, massive rock up a hill. And sometimes if we look at it from the kind of big picture, I think it feels like it's an impossible task to change. So I always think just one small little thing is what we need to be focusing on, just making one kind of incremental step at a time. And, those things, having mental health first aiders really helps, so that those people are a little bit more empathetic and understanding, and that, team members have someone to go to. Also things like having a mental health policy in place where, there's an acknowledgement that a business is trying at least to look after the mental health and wellbeing of their staff. And also, I think one of the key things that I always try and encourage is for people in leadership and management positions to show a little bit of vulnerability about their own mental health. There's no point us saying, it's great, we want everyone to talk openly and honestly about their mental health, if the people who are owning businesses, leading businesses, running businesses aren't doing the same. So for me, it's a lot about that kind of vulnerability and being open and just, admitting that sometimes it's really tough for everybody. And that's almost the first step to us being able to address and make it better.
Yeah, I know Sebastian at Oko is really interested in well-being in all kinds of ways, and is also really committed to having a diverse workforce. What kind of, I suppose, extra layers can be part of somebody's picture, if they're, a gender diverse or of, a person of colour? Do you notice that there's more of an overflowing stress container?
100%. So we see in almost all minority groups that there are much higher rates of mental health issues and poor mental health. This is something that we work on a lot at Kelly's Cause as well. So Rachel, who is our amazing managing director, who Sebastian actually introduced me to, and she's just absolutely amazing. She really steers the ship at Kelly's Cause and makes sure everything is running amazingly. But one of the initiatives that she has brought in is that every year we now do an LGBT LGBTQIA plus specific training. So we fully fund it. So we put it on for free for people, and Rachel like trudges around London to different queer bars and clubs and venues, speaking with owners and managers and finding people to come on the course. And actually that one that we have run for the last few years has been a really, really amazing kind of safe space that we've created. And we speak really openly in that about the fact that, you know, people who are gender diverse or people who are queer or people who are from minority backgrounds do have much higher rates of mental health issues. And we talk about all the reasons why that can be and then what we can start to do to address it. Because I think there's this misconception in hospitality that it's a very diverse workforce. And in some ways it is, but it's not diverse at the top. You know, if you look at people who own restaurants, manage restaurants, are kind of in executive roles in hospitality businesses, majority of them are straight white men. So while we might have diversity in terms of people who are working on the floor and behind the bar and in the kitchen, we don't have that diversity in management level. So that's one of the kind of key things that we need to be addressing.
What do you see, Tobie-Anna, in terms of people that are doing it really well? Like you mentioned, you know, having a mental health policy or that vulnerability coming from management. What other sorts of initiatives, whether it's structural or messaging, do you see in businesses that really support people's mental wellness?
Yeah, I think there are so many people and so many businesses out there now that are doing great things. I think a key thing is things like rotas, or as rosters as we call it in Australia, and hours that people work, like businesses putting in place, you know, the fact that people don't work more than 40 to 45 hours, that they're never doing 50 to 60, 70, 80-hour weeks like people used to do before. It's about, honestly, these things are so simple and basic, like publishing people's rotas and rosters, like at least a few weeks in advance so people can plan their life. You know, giving people the chance to request days off when they have, you know, weddings, birthdays, holidays, whatever it is to go on. Making sure that people take their breaks, making sure that people don't work 17-hour shifts, making sure, you know, the split shift was something that I used to do all the time when I first started being a chef. And honestly, it's absolutely a joke. The fact that you get a 3-hour break in the middle of your day, which isn't even enough time to go home and do anything, like, that you don't get paid for is ridiculous. Like, even, you know, a few years later, I can't believe that that was a thing. And I'm sure many, many people still do them. So businesses that are really saying, actually, we're going to prioritize the mental health and well-being of our staff. These are the hours that you're going to work. You're not going to go above that. You're going to be taking your breaks. You're going to be having your holidays as holidays. It really, a lot of it is to do with boundaries as well. And just making sure that also at the end of the day, we remember that we're not saving people's lives. We're literally serving people food and drink and giving them a good time. And I think sometimes that perspective of, you know, not putting too much stress and pressure on everyone can help a lot as well.
So you mentioned that, you know, looking after your workforce is simply the right thing to do, but that it's also good for business. What sort of positive impacts can these initiatives have on a business?
Well, I always think of it as being as simple as, if your staff are happy, your customers are much more likely to be happy and they're much more likely to spend more money, and your business is going to make more money and therefore be more successful. You know, obviously now we have seen such a kind of, in other industries, we're so much more focused on where things have come from and the fact that they're ethical, and people are really interested in, you know, the fact that their fish is sustainably sourced and things like that. But we also need to be thinking about the ethical labor within hospitality, and is that happening? And the people who are serving you being treated as well as the fish that you are eating that was sustainably sourced. And it, you know, it just is, particularly now when it's so hard to recruit in hospitality, like businesses just have to be retaining their teams. And you know, the thing that costs, I think I'm sure it's a very similar statistic in Australia, but here it costs on average £1,000, so, you know, about $1,700. Every time you hire, you have to replace a member of your team. That's for junior members. For anyone in a management position, it costs close to £5,000, so, you know, about $8,500, $9,000. So it really is just a case of being able to support your staff and keep your team members means that you're going to save money by not having to recruit as much.
I mean, it makes the investment in mental health first aid seem like pretty good, pretty cheap, really.
Yeah, exactly. It costs about $5,500 to train 22 mental health first aiders. That's the cost of replacing, 2 members of your team. So if having those mental health first aiders in place helps you keep 2 people, you've already, seen your full return on investment. Plus, the statistics also say that you get about a 5-to-1 return on investment for mental health training. So for every $1 that you invest, you get about a $5 return.
Love that. You talked about customers and their ethics. I mean, how much does customer behaviour play into the way that workers are feeling in hospitality businesses?
So much. And do you know what? I really was hopeful during the pandemic that it would get better, that what would come from the pandemic would be a little bit more kind of understanding and empathy. I don't know what it's like in Australia. I think from the few people I have spoken to, it seems to be the same as here, that customers are just ruder and worse than ever. And it's definitely the case in London that people are, expecting better service. They're obviously also, with the cost of everything going up, you can kind of understand that when people are paying more, they do expect more of a level of service. But yeah, it definitely has such a big impact in what we see in London in particular. And I'm sure it's the same in Australia. I'm sure it's especially the same in places more like Sydney, where you might have some kind of more rich areas where you get a particular type of customer that is quite entitled, and that can be really, really hard for people to deal with. And obviously no one deserves to be, abused or spoken badly to while they're doing their job, but we see that happening all the time, and that can play into it so much.
So, Tobie-Anna, I mean, for people who are listening to this in Australia and wondering what it means for Kelly's Cause to start up here, what do they need to know?
So obviously it's something that we're super excited about. It's always kind of been in the back of my mind as something that I've wanted to do, obviously having spent the first 23 years of my life living in Australia, and having, friends who work in the hospitality industry there. So basically when Sebastian, for those of you who don't know, he used to live in London, and we worked together quite a few years ago now and became very good friends. And then once Kelly's Cause was kind of up and running, he joined us as head of partnerships, and then obviously got the opportunity to open Oko and had to take that up to go back home. And then basically since he's been back in Melbourne, we've been squirreling away trying to figure out how we can get it open and get Kelly's Cause off the ground in Australia. So that's something that's finally happened. So Sebastian will be our mental health first aid instructor, which is amazing because obviously it's something that he believes in so much and is so passionate about, and also really understands and has a very, very vast experience of working in hospitality. Because I guess that's kind of a point that I have failed to mention so far, is that what the kind of sets Kelly's Cause apart from anybody else is the fact that everybody who works with us and for us has an extensive hospitality background, and everything that we do, our mental health first aid training, everything like that is done with the kind of lens of hospitality experience on it. So obviously with Sebastian's vast experience and now his experience operating restaurants as well, means that he is quite literally the perfect person to be our mental health first aid instructor over there. So businesses can reach out to him or to me or to australia@kellyscause.com. And either Sebastian or I will get back in touch with you. And just getting mental health first aid training, and then also working with businesses to help them create mental health policies, and just provide them any other support that they need.
That is amazing, Tobie-Anna. So great. Like really, you're just really changing lives. And as you said at the start of the chat, saving lives. That is just really powerful. Thank
you so much. Yeah, it's very exciting.
Really appreciate your time in talking us through Kelly's Cause today, Tobie-Anna. And I know that it's going to mean a lot to so many people listening, just to know that perhaps things that they're feeling, there are people that are going to be able to listen and, they can start to get some assistance. So, yeah, really appreciate it. Thank you.
No worries. Thank you so much for having me. It was great to chat.
This is Dirty Linen, and I'm Dani Valent. We air the issues that the hospitality industry finds hard to talk about, hearing from different people with unique perspectives. We want to hear from you as well. If you have something that needs to be said about a topic, get in touch so we can include your perspective. Contact us at dirtylinen@deepintheweeds.com.au or hit us up on Insta at Dirty Linen Podcast. We can't wait to hear from you.
This